And now I want to welcome back Dr. Rajni Shankar-Brown of Stetson University. And she's among the most prominent educational scholars. We all know this already, right? Because she's been here so many times and it's so wonderful. A scholar in social justice in the United States and internationally. She's published leading works, presented around the globe, and received numerous awards for her innovative leadership and ongoing community engagement projects. She's known at this church for her engaging and educational presentations. Today, Rajni will present Butterflies and Semicolons, Humanizing Mental Health.
Good morning. Yay. So today, even before we start, I'm going to wake us up a little bit. And so some of you may remember I shared this in the past, but this is one of my favorite affirmations that I do with my kids at home. And it goes, I'm alive, I'm awake, and I feel great. I'm alive, I'm awake, and I feel great. Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. So good morning. Today, as we sit, it's such a special weekend. We're still celebrating Arbor Day, which just happened, right? Earth Day over the past week. And I just, even before I start, really start with gratitude. This is such a community of love, and even just looking around at the greenery, every time I pull up the trees, the blooms, I saw flowers as I was walking in today. Just what a lovely space. So thank you all for creating this space that it is. So April is recognized as World Health Awareness Month, and it is also Stress Awareness Month. And I can tell you right now, in many schools across America and campuses, there is a lot of stress, right? It is the time where the end of the semester is coming, all of the testing that our babies and kids are having to endure with even standardized testing mania. It's a bit too much from my perspective that our kids are having to go through. But there is a lot of stress. And so I think that as we are meeting today, it's not just a time for information, but a time really for reflection, for deep pause, and even a call to action. And so often you may have heard the greatest wealth is health. That if we don't have our health, it's really hard to do all of the different things that we want to do. And right now, what we know about mental and behavioral health is we are sitting at a time where we have some of the highest numbers we have ever seen, especially with our adolescents. It is very high. In fact, teen suicide, that is the second leading cause of death for adolescents in the United States. And globally as well, the numbers are extremely high. And we've continued to see rises, and even where we are situated, it is heartbreaking. You only have to look at how many precious lives we've lost in our own local schools, all in our own communities right here. And it's awful, right? And I think it's a call for our attention. And so today I have a beautiful butterfly here by Eric Carle. I don't know if you know The Hungry Caterpillar and all of the picture books. I always love art. And I've paired that here with a semicolon, with intention. And we're going to talk a bit about the semicolon being a symbol and talk about how do we humanize mental and behavior health and move beyond stigmas, labels, tearing people down in all sorts of ways. So this, I just wanted to bring to attention. March was also Self-Harm Awareness Month. And right now we are seeing an increase in self-harm. Self-harm, what does that look like? It can look like cutting yourself, where we have many youth that are cutting themselves. It can look like pulling out your hair. It can look like even translating into even thinking about body image and mental health, like bulimia, all of these different things that we're starting to see. And so we move into April, Stress Awareness Month, World Health Awareness Month, and then in May, which is coming right around the corner, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so that is the reason, given the opportunity to talk today, I chose this topic. I thought it was timely. So what is mental health? The World Health Organization talks about mental health being a state of well-being that individuals have, and it is the awareness around our abilities, our ability to cope with stressors, to work productively, to contribute to our communities, and to live fulfilling lives. And you can see here, I kind of give a simple definition of mental health being a person's overall state of emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And I'm going to add spiritual well-being as well, which is important. And it shapes how we think, feel, act, relate to others, handle stress, and make choices in daily life. And I have artwork here by Matilda Wenzel called Shells of Illusion. Shells of illusion. So you almost see this person with all of these fractures and wounds, and almost like an eggshell, the cracks and fragility that all of us as humans have. There's a vulnerable side, even as we talk about this. Often it can be, it's really interesting to think about the human story. And again, I always think about the Moksha nesting doll, how sometimes we show up on the outside, but we never know the layers of stories somebody is carrying inside. And sometimes we ourselves do not take the time to go back and open up to get to that baby core. And it's really important to give space and make place to have those really in-depth, reflective touch points with each other and ourselves. So behavior health and mental health are very much interconnected. We know that mental health affects behavior health, and behavior health affects mental health. So there is a very close connection here that is really important for us to remember. And we know that it is more than the absence of illness, but mental and behavior health affect our daily life, how we go through and how we live every day. How do we cope with challenges and stressors? And I would add, right now, we're living at a time where right now in human history, the stressors are immense. We are living at a time where, in fact, there's a quotation I wrote down here by Gabor Mate that I love, and it says, what we call mental illness is often a sane response to insane circumstances. Think about our world right now. All of the humanitarian crises that is happening. Everything, you just turn on the news. Even if you don't turn on the news, you feel the weight. And that is what our adolescents are carrying. Our planet is literally on fire. We have wars where people are losing lives. We have daily threats to our educational system, to safety nets and resources that have been cut and cut and cut. And people are struggling, even as certain people continue to benefit off of the struggling of others. A very sick system that needs a lot of healing and a lot of love. So it's important for us to think about, how do we build and maintain healthy ways to express our emotions, and how do we give that to our youth? Because for a lot of our youth, they don't have access points to have healthy ways to learn to cope. This is one of the big reasons I am a very big believer in the arts, because it's not about everybody being the next Picasso or the next George Harrison, right? Or the next, you think about all of these wonderful artists that have existed in the world with song and paint and dance, theater. But in fact, it is about giving that process as a tool for our youth to express themselves, to unpack emotions, to be able to utilize that. And right now we are seeing cuts in the arts in all of our schools, where so many of our babies have very little access to any of that. In my own life, as somebody who's had a lot of intersectional traumas, the arts have quite literally saved my life over and over again. And so I want everybody to have access to that. And I want our young people to know, even we are living at a time where eco affinity is being decreased, where so many of our young people, they're not going outside. They don't have connection and relationship with nature, with soil. I love, even for Arbor Day, taking out youth, and so many of them, that was the first time they dipped their hands into soil. And you could see this kind of feeling of liberation, smiles. They felt good. They knew all of a sudden the joy of the earth. And I encouraged them. I said, go out more, right? And it's not always a possibility based on some of the social hierarchies and oppressive systems we have. If you're living in a city where it's unsafe to go outside, you may not have that ability, right, or opportunity. But for a lot of our youth, they have opportunities, but we've devised systems, even think about our technology, that keeps a lot of our, students, they are at school all day, many of them on devices for a bulk of the day. And then they go home and they're on their device for hours and hours and hours. And that's not healthy. And we know that, right? I love here, there's the conversation tree, the opportunity to be outside and renew our spirits. So we know that the state of mental and behavioral health, it affects so many different things. And we have a rise across all ages, especially youth. We have lingering collective trauma now and high ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. Deep and persistent inequities that add to all of this. So think about our increase now with homelessness. There is very, very deep correlations when you're experiencing layers of violence and uncertainty and fear and having to face elements that also add to some of these challenges. And then growing awareness and ongoing stigma, which we have. So the stigma comes out, it's interesting. We do these surveys where we ask people all sorts of questions to start to understand, how does mental and behavioral health challenges show up in the everyday lives we live? And one of the things we consistently see is people, even in a workplace, are afraid to call in or be open to say, I need a day off because I am facing depression, or I have such high anxiety. I'm near burnout. Instead, they'll often make up a response like, I have, a stomach issues, a really bad migraine. We take it to the physiological, which then shows us that mental and behavioral health is still not something that we're openly accepting, but in fact, that we are stigmatizing in ways. So people are afraid to openly talk about that and share. And that is a shame, especially when we consider over 50% of people in our country face mental illness every year. And it's not an individual case, it's a humanitarian case. Again, I told you that for our teens, we know that as they are facing increased mental health challenges, and suicide again being the second leading cause of death in our country for adolescents, starting from the age of 10. This is also at a time where our schools, again, are not being funded in ways that need to happen, where we don't have social workers, psychologists, vital people that our children need. And I'm going to add, we're also adding to mental and behavioral health challenges for people who are in caregiving professions. So you imagine a really, really large high school with, thousands of kids, hundreds and hundreds of kids. And you have maybe 2 counselors, 3 counselors to cover all of that. And often, a lot of that is also helping students with things like college applications, making sure they're meeting graduation requirements. And with all of the paperwork that is included, it is immense. And so even having the time where, it was interesting, my daughter, she needed help for something that was school related. And I had said, make an appointment with your counselor at school and they should be able to help. And so there's a sign up to go meet, and she put her sign up in. Well, it was a 3-week wait until she could get to see a counselor. And it wasn't listed what she needed the counselor for. So imagine if she had something serious at that moment that she needed to go talk to somebody about. Imagine 3 weeks to have to wait to be able to have access to that kind of support. So this is the reality, the lived reality of what we are facing and what we are seeing in so many ways. We also know that with suicide, we are seeing rates at a 40-year high. And post-pandemic, it has increased, surged, and it is continuing to surge. Healthcare is a human right. The other thing I want to share today is if you look at this map, you'll see a lot of red areas. And what we know is we have a million shortage of healthcare professionals to help with mental health care in communities. So that is the other piece. And I can tell you, even working with youth in my mentoring program that I have for youth experiencing housing instability and homelessness, trying to get mental health care in place for people who really need it. It is almost impossible because wait lists are so long. So many times, you may have better luck with the teleport mental health counselor, but that's not sometimes what a child, a young adolescent, a human being, even us as adults, always need. For some, that works well. But for others, they need to see a human face to face, the words we read earlier, right, Amy, with looking at each other's eyes, reminding ourselves of our own humanity. So it really, when we talk about healthcare as a human right, we have so much work to do in our country and globally. So we need to move beyond stigma and silence. And what we know today is, again, over 60% of adults in the United States, just taking adults, face severe mental illness. And over 60% do not have access and do not get the care that they're needed, right? So you think about 1 in 5 adults actually having mental illness, and then that number even grows as we're looking at various forms of mental illness depending on what your definition is. And then to think that over 60% are not receiving care that is needed. And we know that Brené Brown tells us owning our story and loving ourselves through the process is the bravest thing we'll ever do. And I love also the words of Maya Angelou, who reminds us that one of the greatest and biggest burdens one can carry is a story that is never told. And for so many of us, we are carrying stories that are never told. And so we have a lot of work to do. We want to start to think about what are the stigma blocks to access care? How do we share lived experience that humanizes? Can we build in awareness and prevention and early intervention points into our systems? And I do believe this is a collective responsibility that all of us have in our communities. Healing and awakening care is really vital. And I think we can all start to ask ourselves even a number of questions as we go through our own days to check in and say, how are we doing? Because a lot of times we are running, going, and we're not taking the time we need to even ask ourselves what is really going on. How many times we pass each other and just say, how are you? I'm here, I'm going, doing okay, right? But not really taking the time to unpack and answer the question. And it's an important one that has a lot of importance to the way we live our lives, lead our lives, to our happiness, and to our health. So here I share, and I'm happy to share my slides as well, so you can kind of go back and revisit. But these are a lot of different questions we can start to ask ourselves, and we can start to share with people in our lives, with loved ones. So they have these questions as tools to ask in their own lives. If my current emotion were a color, what would it be? What strategies have I found helpful in managing my mental health? For many, they don't have strategies. So we start from there, identifying, acknowledging, I don't have strategies. So let me get the help and start to build my toolbox to have strategies that are healthy. How do I typically respond to challenging or uncomfortable emotions? What helps me calm down when I feel overwhelmed? When, I am overwhelmed, how do I calm down? And this is a central question. Working with a lot of adolescent students, sometimes they're not given agency in school to be able to calm themselves down, right? In schools, you have to ask permission for every little thing, and often you're denied if something is going on in a lesson. It is not as personalized as an educator like Maria Montessori, who developed kind of a different educational system. One of her arguments was developmentally, all of us should have agency in our lives to take care of ourselves. And sometimes that means I'm not doing well in this present moment. I can't focus. Maybe I need to take myself out into the garden for a moment to breathe, and then to be able to come back and return so I can continue learning and engaging. Maybe I need to go and take a moment to get a drink of water. Some of the kids are telling me they can't even go get water from the water fountain, right? The rules are so strict. And I understand rules are part of life and they're everywhere. But when they're starting to cost humans the ability to have agency in their own care and what they need, it is problematic. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of systems, right? From work to school to even in communities. So we have a lot of work to do. And I want to lift today, as we're here with World Mental Health Awareness Month, 5 C's. The 5 C's are clarity, connection, coping, control, and compassion. And so there are many frameworks you can start to embed into your own toolbox. This is one that you can start to think about. And so you start with clarity, and clarity is really understanding, what are my thoughts right now? What are my emotions? And that takes, really intentional time to pause, to say, I'm going to pause in my day to really see what's happening and what's going on. Connection is all about relationships. It is all about belonging. One of the reasons I love what you have created here. I see it. I feel it. Before the service even starts, people are checking in on each other, the smiles that you exchange. There is a support that is built in. And that relationship and belonging is so important. And for so many people, it does not exist, including our young people. So after connection is coping. How do we have healthy strategies in our life to cope? How do we cope? And sometimes we've learned to cope over our lifetime with things that are unhealthy, but they've become normalized. So how do we also unlearn that and add healthy mechanisms for coping when we have stress, when we have different things show up, when we need the help to actually deal with depression or anxiety or all of the different mental health challenges one may face in their journey? Because remember, mental health, even as we talk about that, it is not static, it is dynamic. It is on a continuum. And any one of us can kind of have weeks where we're doing well, weeks where we're not doing well, right? And so how do we keep ourselves afloat in this journey of life? Plato said, be kind to everyone you meet. You never know what kind of battle they are fighting, right? So every one of us has battles, has challenges. We never know when we look at somebody, as we're going through the grocery aisle, as we're just walking down the street or as we're doing our daily errands, you never know what somebody else is going through on that other side. And I think about that often as I walk through my days, even just trying to offer a smile, to look at somebody in the eyes, to remind each other we are human, right? We are human. Wellness wheels can be really wonderful for us to incorporate into our lives and to think about. And I just want to share wellness is not only individual, it's collective and community wide as well. So, thinking about our own wellness in terms of how are we as a community too? Is our community well? In spaces that we have, are we well emotionally, mentally, spiritually, right? Occupationally, environmentally, financially, socially, physically? Are we doing things to support each other in all of these dimensions? And, I love to reflect, and there are many different forms of wellness wheels, and you can have everything from 7 dimensions to 12 dimensions, and you can also make your own wheel. What does wellness look like to you? What offers you the most wellness in your own life? And then sharing that with others as well to encourage them. We have a Sanskrit saying that translates to be happy and free. May we all know peace. May we all be loved. May we all be healthy and safe. Loka samastapang. Right? And we say all of these words over and over again as a manifestation to remember and to move from just I to we. Again, when you take the word illness and you take off I and replace it with W-E, we, what does it become? Wellness, right? Wellness. And our Vedas talk about that, which I love. And even as you look across texts, spiritual texts, even from the 7 principles at the Unitarian Universalist, talking about even our interconnected, interdependent web of life, all the way to the Bhagavad Gita, Quran, Bible, Torah, you're going to see this idea and thread of well-being that comes up and shows up and reminds us that we are all connected to each other. So mental and behavioral health is how we live, how we connect, how we care for ourselves and each other. And I want to share with you a poem. It's also National Poetry Month. So I cannot not share a poem. And so I wrote this one for the talk today, and it's called Echoes of Rising. Echoes of Rising. Shadows coil like venomous cobras in the parcels of our mind, thoughts drifting, restless, untamed, carnivorous. Breathe. Breathe deeply. Deeply rooted stalks push through mud and despair, reminding us that even fractured hearts stretch toward golden sun. Butterflies emerge through chrysalis, fragile and fierce, their wings tracing courage across charcoal's crying skies. They remind us also to rest when it rains. Pain pulses like molten silver through hidden veins, our bodies bearing witness to each wound it carries. We search for lotus buds in mud. We search for community in each other. We learn to draw and become living semicolons. Rise, speak, shatter the silence, dismantle the stigma. No, we are not alone. Hope echoes, rising, rising, rising together. Semicolon. And the semicolon has such a beautiful meaning, even in the mental health community. Often you may see even some of our young people have semicolon tattoos or stickers on their laptops. And it's a reminder our story continues and goes on. That even when a day feels like a period and it feels like we just want this to be over, to refuse and resist and to take the period off and put the semicolon, to remind ourselves the sun will come up, to not give up. So there is a Hopi proverb that I really love, and it says the greatest healing therapy is friendship and love. And I love that. at its very roots. And you think about from indigenous cultures all the way across history and time, how when people have made circles of community, there have been so many blessings come out of that. Even when we think about our social movements that have happened for human rights and civil rights and justice, I think about how people formed circles of friendship and love with intention, because it takes intention to do that. But it's something all of us can do. So as we go through our life, let us remember to be butterflies. And let us remember that the caterpillar, right, that process to become a butterfly is quite miraculous. All of the things that happen and the imaginal cells that come at it, and it resists, but then eventually it goes through its metamorphosis to become that butterfly. And we have that power in all of us. And so as we sit on World Mental Health and Health Awareness Month, my hope is that this encourages all of us to continue to talk, to say, look, hi, I'm Rajni Shankar-Brown. I have struggled with high anxiety my entire life. Anxiety from various traumas, anxiety because it runs in my family line. I come from a family that has deep depression and anxiety genetically. And every single day, I work hard to make sure I have a semicolon. And I work hard to make sure that those around me do as well. So let's talk. Let's ask each other, how are you? And take the time to listen. Namaste. Thank you all so much for having me today.